Last Epoch. Good day, fellow gamers. For those who do not know me, I am Soxy Rabbit, an avid gamer and Twitch streamer. Today we are looking at the new Acolyte class's third and final mastery, the Warlock, which is releasing in Last Epoch 1.0 launch on the 21st of February 2024. Excited. All the content and information that you see here today was solely released on Icy Veins website by Aaron Action RPG. You can find the link to Icy Veins down below for more information. Till recently, I hadn't played the Last Epoch, so for those of you who have not yet experienced this game, let me brief you a tiny bit. Last Epoch is a top-down RPG skill-based game similar to that of Path of Exile, Diablo 4, etc. You start off with a class and then branch down into a mastery, i.e. Acolyte has Necromancer, Lich, and soon Warlock. You have skills, skill trees, passive trees, and items that all affect your build. With Warlock being released soon, we are going to have a look at not only the new skills you will acquire with this mastery, but the new curses that come with it, new passive tree, new skill trees, and potentially what builds we may be able to curate in the future. The Warlock will introduce 5 skills to this class, including a channeling one and 5 curses. With Warlock Mastery, we do see the return of Soul Feast that is originally from the Lich Mastery class, but the skill tree has changed a fair bit and there has been some buffing done to this skill. The official description of the skill is that it feasts on the souls of cursed enemies, dealing necrotic damage to them and drawing fragments of their souls back to you to bolster your defenses. The buff to this skill is that Soul Feast no longer requires targets to be cursed and no longer has a target limit, but now hits all enemies in a small cone in front of you. Chaos Bolts are your spammable, low mana usage projectiles that inflict fire and necrotic damage around your target. I think this skill will be invaluable, especially at the beginning of your game or in a tight spot, due to the low usage of mana. Pair this with one of your stronger mana leeching skills and you are covered either way. Chthonic Fissure splits the earth with an infernal fissure that releases spurs that curse your enemies. This could have been paired perfectly with Soul Feast, but as they have buffed the latter to not need curse to proc it, this now has become slightly redundant. However, it can serve a purpose in many other forms, which we will touch on later. Now, if you like your channeling skills, here is one just for you. Ghost Flame is a necrotic and fiery continuous burst in front of you, but be sure to keep an eye on your mana as this can deplete it if you are not paying attention. Lastly, we have our more defensive and movement skill, Profane Veil, which makes you almost invincible with a guaranteed dodge mechanic. Onto the new curses, starting off with Anguish, a 10-second buff that reduces damage over time and deals necrotic damage to all afflicted whenever you kill an enemy. Personally, I think this could be used for a great passive defensive build, but we can get into more on that later when we cover the skill trees and passive tree. Penance is a 15-second buff which causes those affected by it to take 20 fire damage when they attack. Bear in mind though that this does not stack, as for some arbitrary reason unbeknown to me, like a moth to a flame, I am generally drawn to a fire build, so I can see myself utilizing this at some point. Decrepify deals 200 physical damage over 10 seconds, with added damage applying at 100% effectiveness per second and causes the target to take more damage from damage over time based on the missing health of the caster. Now, this statement about added damage caused a huge debate amongst my gaming friends and I as to what specifically they were stating here. We hypothesized 3 theories, but eventually agreed on this. If said target is 100% vulnerable to decrepify and has no resistance towards it, then a damage modifier of a yet unspecified amount is added on top of your physical damage every second. Acid Skin deals 80 poison damage over 5 seconds, with added damage applying at 80% effectiveness per second, and adds a 20% chance to be critically hit. So if I understand this correctly, this one has a bit of a debuff as well, as enemies have a high chance for a critical strike. This originally perked my interest, as I'm a sucker for builds that employ poison damage over time, but this added incoming damage may just sway me off it, unless I can combine it with some passive health regen skills that turn me into a resilient beast. Torment deals 120 spell necrotic damage over 3 seconds, with added damage applying at 200% effectiveness per second, and reduces movement by 12%. It does not stack, but is multiplicative with other modifiers. This again left us a tiny bit stumped, as the statement was a tad ambiguous as to what does not stack. We speculated that potentially just the reduced movement doesn't, but we're unsure. This should hopefully be clarified later on towards the release of Warlock. To activate these curses, certain passive tree nodes and skill tree nodes such as Dustbringer will need to be unlocked. Although Torment is unlocked on Chthonic Fissure, making it a super useful skill, and to further these buffs, additional effects can be triggered through the trees. So I think these curses are going to be a lot of fun to dabble with. The Warlock is a master of the forbidden arts, utilizing the curses, necrotic, and fire magic, and as such, we can expect to see a lot of the passive tree leaning towards aiding these. Their blanket passive bonuses include a 5% more damage per curse on a single target and a 35% fire and necrotic resistance. If you add the passive skills from the base Acolyte, Forbidden Knowledge at 40%, and Unnatural Preservation with an additional 20%, by the time you unlock the Warlock, you are sitting on a staggering 95% resistance to necrotic damage. Apart from the obvious reasons of it being a strong defensive, this percentage is so applicable to one of the passive tree nodes, Imperishable. Imperishable not only increases your vitality by +1 per point, but once you have allocated 3 points to this node, you are buffed by a +1 ward decay threshold per 1% necro resistance, i.e. +95 ward decay threshold. For those of you who are a bit unfamiliar to gaming terminology like myself, ward decay acts like a shield that deteriorates over time, if not constantly regenerated. As your necrotic resistance is a fixed buff, I'm not 100% sure how Imperishable ward decay will be procced, unless the +95 threshold is a fixed amount and will not decay over time. But I am sure we'll find out soon enough. There are a couple of other passive skills such as Ward of Malevolence that also affect your ward, so these might be worth investigating how they might function together further when we have access to it. Looking at the passive skill tree, our Action RPG was super excited about one of the first nodes, and I can definitely see why. Chaos Flames has increased fire damage, ignite chance with fire skills, increased necrotic damage, and damn chance with necrotic skills at 6% per point. The reason this is so badass is not only because it applies to your minions as well as your own attacks, but you can pop 8 points into this node, potentially stacking up those stats from 6% each to 48. Now for mana-hungry builds, the next 2 vital nodes you'll want to inspect are Soul Eater and Oculist's Mind. With Soul Eater, you stand a chance to regain some mana when hitting a target per curse afflicted upon them, whereas Oculist's Mind is just a straight increase to your mana per point of intelligence. Another aspect that we will need to consider is our life and life regen. And the first passive skill node that affects this greatly is Spirit Leech. This passive is a basic reward system for inflicting as much damage as you possibly can in a short period of time. It reads as follows. A portion of the damage you do is returned to you as health over 3 seconds. Please bear in mind though that they have stated in the video that you have to be hitting cursed enemies, so make sure to wield those curses. This sits at 0.25%, which may seem small, but one, I would presume that it does stack over those 3 seconds, and point two is that it is 0.25% per point, with a resounding 6 points allocated to this particular node. Apart from an assortment of combinations you can create with the passive skill tree that overlap, complement, and aid each other, such as Vessels of Chaos, which deals more damage over time for each active ailment overload, which directly aids any of the overloads, i.e. bleed overload, poison overload, etc. Anyway, back to combinations. There are various clusters in the passive skill tree that each benefit one another as well. We will not be covering them all, but we are going to jump straight to the cluster that entails new skills distinctive to the Warlock Mastery: Chains of Ruin, Flame Whip, and Witchfire. Starting with Chains of Ruin, this by itself is an incredibly useful ability, as it not only gives you dam chance at plus 13% per point, but with a 5-point bonus to this node, when you cast a necrotic skill and enemies within 15 meters have a combined 20 stacks or more of damned, you chain all damned enemies to the ground for 2 seconds and gain damned overload for 12 seconds. Again, on a side note, Vessels of Chaos would be perfect pairing with this. To further add to this, within the cluster you will find Grasping Damnation, which increases the duration of the chains and the damned effect. Furthermore, for a 5-point bonus, while you have damned overload, you have a chance to chain nearby enemies to the ground each second. Jumping to Infernal Lash. At this point, they do not string together with Chains of Ruin yet, but we will get into how they all piece together in a moment. Infernal Lash has an ignite chance of plus 13 per point, as well as a 5-point bonus that when you cast your fire skill and enemies within 15 meters have a combined 25 or more stacks of ignite, you strike up to 3 nearby enemies with Flame Whip and gain ignite overload for 12 seconds. Now, what on earth is Flame Whip? Only the coolest looking fire whipping ass attack you can imagine. This is further augmented by the node Scorched Reach, increasing your fire damage by a whopping 8% per point. FYI, this node has 7 allocated to it, so that can take us up to a staggering 56%. Holy moly. And add your 5-point bonus, which is while you have Ignite Overload and you kill an ignited enemy or hit an ignited boss or rare enemy, you cast Flame Whip at nearby enemies. Even more Flame Whip! The skill in particular has me fueled up and ready to make a fire damage build as soon as the 21st hits, although a necrotic build could be quite fun too. Now let's turn our attention to how Chains of Ruin and Infernal Lash Combine, because this is where it gets really fun and juicy. Inspecting Ashen One, this increases both necrotic and elemental damage by a shocking 64%. What even are these numbers? What even are you? That is just a ridiculously hefty increase. And don't forget your 5-point bonus. When you gain Ignite Overload or Damned Overload, all ignited and damned enemies within 15 meters are inflicted with Witchfire, which I'll explain with the next node. At the present, I'm not sure why you would need to invest in all 8 points allocated to the slot, as there is no per point scaling here, but potentially you might have to unlock the next node, which you should definitely at the very least check out. Grimhide's Domain. This node unites and complements this cluster so beautifully, as it not only adds more damage but creates a boomerang effect that just keeps going. It reads as follows: Witchfire that you inflict deals more damage, multiplicative with other modifiers, per global chance to ignite with fire skills, and per global chance to inflict damned with necrotic skills. Wow, that's a mouthful. Additionally, while you have Ignite or Damned Overload, your hits spread Witchfire to a number of enemies within 10 meters. Starting to see the boomerang effect yet? Don't worry, I have not forgotten to unravel the mystery of Witchfire. So without further ado, Witchfire is an ailment that deals 300 fire and 300 necrotic damage over 12 seconds. It cannot stack, but this is just an insane amount of power, especially when you consider what Grimhide's Domain attributes to this. And if you pop Chaos Flames on here as well, boom, even more power! Moving on to the skill trees. As I've just been blown away by the Flame Whip, Chains of Ruin, and Witchfire cluster, I will be focusing on nodes that could potentially enhance this as a build. So we won't be covering everything, but remember, there is a link down below to Icy Veins if you wish to learn more. If you like your channeling skills, then this one is for you. As for Ghost Flame, this alone will work well with Witchfire, as it does both necrotic and fire damage along with most of the other skills. But let's dive into the skill tree and see how we can develop this build. We already have a chance to cause Damned and Ignite chance with Chains of Ruin and Infernal Lash. But if you wish to up your chances, you can slot on Dread Furnace, increasing these stats by a plus 40% per point. Now, if you would like to focus on Ghost Flame as your main form of attack, Flames of Misery will apply a portion of your global Ignite chance on hit. Now applies as Ignite chance per second for Ghost Flame, as well as a portion of your global Damn chance on hit now applies as Damn chance per second for Ghost Flame. What a conversion. Memorial of Flames will then allow Ghost Flame to detach from you and continue for a short duration without you channeling. This can then be empowered with Unending Ruin, which increases the duration, and Burning Skull, which makes your detached Ghost Flame slowly seek out your enemies. This can be devastating while keeping you at arm's length. Add a little defense to your build with Disdain, as this allows you to take less damage by minus 10% per point by ignited, damned, or bleeding enemies while channeling this skill. And we are already onto something with a vengeance. There is so much more we could play around with when it comes to a Witchfire build. from necrotic beams to movement-based builds to dealing damage in a full circle around you rather than just in a cone. But the possibilities and combinations would keep us here all day. So, on to the next skill. For the spammies out there like me, we have you covered with Chaos Bolts. Chaos Bolt seems to have a wider variety of build types, from bleed to frost to necrotic to fire, as well as necromancy attributes. But as I stated before, we will be pinpointing those nodes that will enhance Witchfire. And to start off, we have Mania in Flames, which causes Chaos Bolt's hits to have a chance to ignite enemies by plus 20% per point. Add Condemned to Chaos, which is a damned version of Mania in Flames, and you have Damned and Ignite damage fueling your build already. After that, pop on Exalt in Misery, which increases the damage of your Chaos Bolts to Damned, Ignited, Bleeding, and Frostbitten targets. Now, if you want to rely heavily on curses, there are quite a few nodes here that will aid you with this. From Doom's Vindication, Devour the Damned, great for replenishing mana and health, Curse Blood, and Seed of Chaos. The four of these work so well together as they create a boomerang effect where Chaos Bolt's hits refresh the duration of your curses. Hitting a cursed enemy with a Chaos Bolt can cause more Chaos Bolts to spawn from that enemy and hit nearby foes, all the while replenishing some health and mana. I mean, what a fantastic combo. Now, if you are wondering what curse you can apply here, you can use the skill tree to apply Anguish through either Duskbringer or Encroaching Darkness. Considering we have just touched up on how to bring your curses into a build, let's talk about Chthonic Fissure. I think Chthonic Fissure is going to be a huge hit, at least in the beginning, as the skill unleashes the cursed torment upon your foes just by using it without even getting into the skill tree. Already, we have a massive advantage having a curse buff applied right off the bat. But let's take it a couple of steps further, shall we? You can then enhance this curse with Spirit Gale, which will release a spirit to inflict more torment on a nearby enemy when an enemy inflicted by torment dies. Bearing in mind, we are still putting emphasis on a Witchfire build, so Damned Waters, which causes spirits to inflict enemies with Damned, is not only going to increase your chance of chaining enemies to the ground with Chains of Ruin, but it will increase your Witchfire chance. This build is just going to fight for itself, and we have hardly touched the skill tree. Twisted Wave strengthens your damage dealt by Torment by 1% per point per 2% necrotic resistance. Did your brain just break doing the math? Because mine did. So if I'm calculating this correctly, as we should be sitting on 95% necrotic resistance with Warlock, if you allocate the 3 full points to this node, this will increase your torment damage by 142.5%. I could be getting the math wrong, but it is a big number, and it is not even taking into account modifiers. Severed Wards will shred enemy necrotic resistance, increasing your chance to the added damage by Torment that kicks in at 200% effectiveness. Now, to add fuel to the fire. We have touched up a lot on necrotic damage for this build, but as Witchfire consists of both fire and necrotic damage, let's jump into those flames. Mantle of Flames, to be specific, allows for ignite chance per second rather than per hit, which is imperative to this build. With Fellfire, tormenting an ignited enemy spreads all of your ignite stacks from it to a number of other enemies around it. With all of this combined, you should not only trigger Chains of Ruin, Flame Whip, and Witchfire, but your added Curse Torment, which is just going to cause a chain reaction that keeps all of these ailments, curses, and buffs repeating. Now, I know I've hardly even begun to delve into the future of builds that you could construct with the Warlock Mastery, but I hope you found this informative and are excited to start your Warlock journey on the 21st of February. You can pre-order the game on Steam. There are 3 purchasing options available. 1, the Standard Edition, which comes with a golden guppy. 2, the Deluxe Edition, which comes with said golden guppy, 50 Epoch points, a soundtrack, and more. And 3, the Ultimate Edition, which comes with everything, or at least more than 1 and 2, as well as 100 Epoch points and other things, including the golden guppy. And if you can't afford it now, don't forget to wishlist it. Links below. Soxy Rabbit bouncing off.